Breaking updates, very important. Snow White, there's been an enormous amount of controversy surrounding Snow White, obviously.
I think it's fair to say that no one can stand the star of this movie.
A lot of people don't like her. A lot of people don't like her either. She's got a big mouth. She talked trash about the original movie.
Controversy has been dogging this movie since the very beginning. So much so that the Daily Wire, I think we played a major role in basically forcing Disney to go reshoot it. Well, it didn't help, apparently. Disney's Snow White was essentially a box office.
Disney's new live-action remake of Snow White debuted this weekend, and it's an even bigger dud than anticipated.
The reason we had Rachel Zegler on the docket is she's an asshole.
Disney is having its own problems. They're finally releasing the latest adaptation of Snow White, but they're scaling back the Hollywood premiere of the film. Kinsey, why is that?
Because Rachel Zegler is a PR nightmare.
And now you better have a good reason to get people to the theaters, and this ain't it. The movie apparently is not very good. I haven't seen it yet. I would be shocked if it were. Again, the star, Rachel Zegler, is unbelievably charmless in public. Studios really need to go back to what they originally did, which was tell your stars to shut up and not say things, because no one is paying to hear your star say offensive things off the screen.
This is someone who is as entitled as, I don't need your business. You know what? Maybe Disney does. Maybe you're a tool, you're a pawn in this film. You didn't write it. You didn't direct it. You have nothing to do with the creation of Snow White. Right. You should shut up and do the job.
Now, one thing about Rachel Zegler is that we know that she's not helping at all one bit.
Every time she opens her mouth, it's crisis mode when it comes to Disney, having to backtrack. She talks about how this isn't a fairy tale about falling in love with the prince. This is a fairy tale about fighting your own battles.
She's not like the ideal choice for the lead role in Sweet Snow White.
Now, one thing that is already universally known at this point by the general public is the fact that Disney is in full-on damage control mode.
This is truly, like, she has to go. I'm sorry.
What if everything you thought you knew about Disney's Snow White was just the tip of a much larger iceberg? A story far more complex and disastrous than anyone could have imagined. At first glance, it seemed like a no-brainer, reviving one of Disney's most iconic films with a live-action remake. After all, who wouldn't want to see the magic of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs brought to life in stunning modern detail? But as the project unfolded, it quickly became clear that this wasn't going to be the charming fairy tale we grew up loving. Instead, it spiraled into a cautionary tale about what happens when nostalgia clashes head-on with arrogance. From controversial casting choices to baffling creative decisions, every step of this production felt like a misstep waiting to happen. The star herself sparked outrage with her dismissive comments about the original film, calling it outdated and irrelevant, a move that alienated fans before the movie even hit theaters. Then came the decision to replace the beloved Seven Dwarfs with forgettable CGI creatures, stripping away the heart and soul of the story. And let's not forget the staggering budget. Hundreds of millions poured into a film that failed to deliver on its promise of wonder and enchantment. So buckle up, because the real story behind Disney's live-action Snow White is less a fairy tale and more a case study in how even the biggest studios can stumble spectacularly. By the time you're done hearing about this debacle, you might just wonder whether Disney should have stuck with animation after all, or maybe avoided remaking their classics altogether. Disney's decision to remake its crown jewel, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, seemed like a no-brainer at first glance. After all, who wouldn't want to see the magic of the original 1937 film brought to life in a modern setting? The idea of reviving one of Disney's most iconic films was met with excitement from both fans and critics alike. It wasn't just any movie. It was the first full-length animated feature ever made by Disney, a cultural treasure that had stood the test of time for nearly a century. But as soon as Rachel Zegler, the actress chosen to play Snow White, stepped into the spotlight, things started unraveling faster than anyone could have predicted. At first, fans were cautiously optimistic. They knew remakes often come with updates and new interpretations, but they also trusted Disney to stay true to the heart of what made the original so special. However, their hopes quickly turned to disappointment when Rachel herself began trashing the very movie she was hired to revive. In interviews leading up to the release, she dismissed the classic animated version as outdated and irrelevant, claiming it didn't resonate with her or modern audiences. These comments struck a nerve with longtime Disney fans. many of whom felt betrayed by someone who didn't seem to respect the legacy of the character she was portraying. Each interview where Rachel criticized the original only fueled more outrage. Fans couldn't understand how the lead actress of such an iconic role could be so dismissive of the story that gave her this opportunity in the first place. Her words alienated not only traditionalists who cherished the 1937 version, but also those who were simply curious about the remake. Instead of building anticipation, Rachel's public statements created division and skepticism even before the film hit theaters. It wasn't long before Disney found itself in full-on damage control mode, scrambling to mitigate the growing backlash against their star and the project as a whole. The situation grew worse as each new comment from Rachel added fuel to the fire. Social media exploded with memes and critiques, turning what should have been a celebration of Disney's heritage into a heated debate over whether the studio had made the right choice in casting her. For many, it felt like Disney had overlooked one of the most basic rules of filmmaking. If you're going to step into the shoes of a legendary character, at the very least, show some respect for the source material. By the time the film was set to premiere, the once optimistic buzz around the remake had transformed into a cloud of negativity, leaving Disney executives wondering how things had gone so wrong, so fast. Rachel Zegler may have been fresh off her critically acclaimed debut in West Side Story, but her transition to the world of Disney proved far more complicated than anyone anticipated. The role of Snow White was meant to be a dream come true for any actress, a chance to step into the shoes of one of the most iconic princesses in cinematic history. However, instead of embracing this legendary character with reverence and excitement, Rachel took an unexpected turn that quickly spiraled into a full-blown PR nightmare for Disney. In multiple interviews, she openly criticized the original 1937 animated film, dismissing it as creepy and boring. These comments struck a nerve among Disney's diehard fanbase, many of whom viewed the original movie as a timeless masterpiece and cultural treasure. To hear such harsh criticism from the very actress chosen to bring Snow White back to life felt like a betrayal. It wasn't just about disagreeing with the source material, it was the tone and delivery that left fans feeling disrespected. Each interview seemed to add fuel to the fire, with Rachel doubling down on her opinions rather than attempting to soften her stance or show appreciation for the legacy she was now part of. Every time Rachel opened her mouth, it felt like another crisis unfolding in real time. For instance, during one particularly infamous interview, she described the original story as outdated and irrelevant, claiming it didn't resonate with modern audiences. While studios often encourage actors to share their unique perspectives, there's a fine line between offering constructive insights and alienating your core audience. Unfortunately, Rachel crossed that line repeatedly, leaving Disney scrambling to mitigate the damage. The backlash grew louder with each passing day, spreading across social media platforms and news outlets alike. Fans flooded Twitter with hashtags like #DisneyDud and #SnowWhiteFlop, expressing their disappointment and frustration. Memes mocking both the actress and the film began circulating widely, further amplifying the negative sentiment surrounding the project. Studios typically advise their stars to remain neutral when discussing classic properties, encouraging them to let the work speak for itself. This age-old rule exists for a reason. Audiences don't always want to hear an actor's personal opinions, especially if those opinions clash with their own deeply held views. Clearly, this memo never reached Rachel Zegler, whose candid remarks only served to deepen the divide between herself and Disney's loyal fanbase. As the backlash continued to mount, Disney executives found themselves in damage control mode, issuing carefully worded statements and launching targeted marketing campaigns in an attempt to steer public perception back toward the film itself. However, despite these efforts, the damage had already been done. By the time the movie finally hit theaters, much of the buzz surrounding its release had soured into skepticism and outright disdain. What started as a promising revival of a beloved classic ended up becoming a cautionary tale about the dangers of letting ego overshadow empathy in high-profile projects. If Rachel Zegler's attitude wasn't enough to alienate fans, the creative team's baffling decision to replace the Seven Dwarfs truly sealed the deal. These beloved characters, who have been an integral part of Snow White since its inception in 1937, were unceremoniously swapped out for a group of generic, CGI-heavy forest beings that lacked any semblance of personality or charm. The dwarfs weren't just side characters. They were the heart and soul of the original story, providing humor, depth, and emotional resonance. They were so iconic that their names, Duck, Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, Bashful, Sneezy, and Dopey, have become ingrained in pop culture. Yet, Disney chose to erase them entirely, replacing them with nameless, forgettable creatures that seemed plucked straight from a generic fantasy movie set. Fans couldn't help but feel betrayed. It was as if Disney had decided to remake Batman without Gotham City's Rogues Gallery, or produce a Harry Potter film without Hogwarts. That's precisely how many viewers felt when they realized the dwarfs, the very backbone of the story, were missing. Social media erupted in outrage. Twitter lit up with memes mocking Disney's choices, Reddit threads exploded with hot takes, and longtime Disney enthusiasts pulled out receipts proving why this was one of the worst reboots in recent memory. Some pointed out that removing such a defining element of the story was akin to rewriting history itself. Others argued that it wasn't just about change, it was about stripping away the heart of what made Snow White special. By abandoning the dwarfs, Disney effectively gutted the essence of the tale, leaving behind a hollow shell that failed to capture the magic of the original. This move wasn't just a misstep. It was a catastrophic error that left fans questioning whether Disney understood the source material at all. For a film rumored to cost between $250 million and $300 million, including marketing, you'd expect nothing short of cinematic wizardry. After all, that kind of budget suggests Disney was pulling out all the stops to deliver a truly magical experience. Unfortunately, what audiences got instead was glossy CGI and sweeping shots of forests and castles that felt more like perfume ads than a nostalgic fairy tale. These visuals, while technically impressive, lacked heart and soul. They failed to evoke the same sense of wonder that made the original Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs such a beloved classic. Trailers had teased epic visuals and an enchanting storyline, promising fans a modern retelling that would honor the spirit of the 1937 masterpiece. However, when the movie finally arrived, it delivered neither. Fans were left feeling cheated, as if they'd been sold on a vision that never materialized. With so much money poured into the project, expectations were sky high. People expected Disney to recapture the whimsy and wonder of the original, blending cutting-edge technology with timeless charm. Instead, they received a cold, sterile retelling that failed to ignite any emotional connection. The characters felt distant, the story uninspired, and the overall tone disconnected from the magic that defined the first film. It wasn't just about missing dwarfs or poorly executed special effects. It was the complete absence of heart. Critics panned the film mercilessly, pointing out its lack of creativity and reliance on flashy visuals over substance. Box office numbers reflected this widespread disappointment. Snow White flopped hard, opening far below expectations and leaving Disney executives scrambling to explain where it all went wrong. For a studio known for delivering unforgettable moments, this was a rare but glaring misstep, one that raised questions about whether Disney's obsession with remakes has finally caught up to them. As ticket sales tanked and reviews poured in, insiders revealed that Disney executives were utterly blindsided by the backlash. How could a billion-dollar studio fail to foresee the firestorm ignited by Rachel Zegler's inflammatory comments? It seems almost incomprehensible that such a major corporation didn't anticipate the outrage her remarks would spark among fans who hold the original Snow White dear to their hearts. Fans weren't just upset about the changes to the story or the absence of the beloved dwarfs. They were deeply offended by Zegler's dismissive attitude toward the very foundation of the character she was hired to portray. Even worse, rumors began circulating within industry circles, suggesting that internal debates raged over whether reshoots might salvage some semblance of audience goodwill. Some reports hinted at discussions around launching aggressive damage control campaigns to mitigate the growing public disdain. There were even whispers about potentially muting the star's future interviews, hoping to prevent further missteps from spiraling out of control. Yet, Despite all these frantic behind-the-scenes efforts, it became increasingly clear that nothing Disney tried managed to stem the tide of negativity. Each desperate measure seemed to fall short, leaving the project adrift in a sea of criticism. For every misstep Disney made, from sidelining the iconic Seven Dwarfs in favor of forgettable CGI forest beings, to allowing their lead actress to trash-talk the original story, the internet retaliated with scathing critiques and merciless mockery. Memes flooded social media platforms, turning what should have been a triumphant return to Disney's roots into a cautionary tale for aspiring filmmakers everywhere. This wasn't merely a bad movie. It was a textbook example of how not to adapt a classic. The failure extended beyond poor creative choices. It highlighted a fundamental misunderstanding of why audiences love certain stories and characters in the first place. By straying too far from the heart of what made the original Snow White so enchanting, Disney effectively alienated the very people they hoped to captivate. And as the dust settled on this debacle, one thing became painfully obvious. The magic had fizzled out long before the curtain ever lifted. In the end, Disney's Snow White remake stands as a glaring example of what happens when studios prioritize fleeting trends over timeless traditions. This disaster wasn't just about missteps in execution. It was a perfect storm of poor decisions that spanned every aspect of the production. Was the failure entirely Rachel Zegler's fault? While her public persona and controversial comments undoubtedly fan the flames of negativity, it would be unfair to place all the blame on her shoulders. After all, she was merely the face of a project plagued with issues long before cameras started rolling. From the baffling decision to replace the beloved Seven Dwarfs with forgettable CGI forest beings to the bloated budget that failed to deliver any real magic, the creative team made choices that alienated fans and stripped away the very essence of what made the original story special. Perhaps both factors, the star's unfiltered attitude and the studio's misguided vision, played significant roles in this downfall. One thing is crystal clear: fans won't soon forget this debacle. It will linger in the annals of cinematic history as a cautionary tale for future reboots. If anything, this fiasco underscores the critical balance studios must strike between respecting the source material and introducing something fresh and relevant. Remaking a classic isn't about reinventing the wheel. It's about honoring its legacy while breathing new life into it. Unfortunately, Disney missed that mark spectacularly here. Maybe they've learned their lesson after this embarrassing flop, or maybe we're doomed to witness the same mistakes repeated with their next big reboot. Only time will reveal whether Disney can recover from this self-inflicted wound or if this marks the beginning of a troubling trend. Until then, one thing remains certain. Audiences are smarter than ever, and they won't hesitate to call out soulless cash grabs disguised as nostalgia trips. So, what do you think? Was Rachel Zegler's attitude the final nail in the coffin, or was the entire project doomed from the beginning? It's a question that's been on everyone's mind since Disney's Snow White remake flopped harder than anyone could have predicted. Sure, Rachel's comments about the original film being creepy and boring didn't help matters one bit. In fact, her dismissive take on the very story she was hired to bring to life might have alienated more fans than any other single factor. But let's not forget, the issues with this movie go way deeper than just one actress' public persona. From the baffling decision to replace the Seven Dwarfs, the literal backbone of the story, with generic forest beings, to the over-reliance on CGI that left the film feeling cold and soulless, it seems like Disney dropped the ball at every turn. And then there's the budget. Hundreds of millions poured into a project that lacked both charm and direction. Could they have salvaged it with better marketing or a tighter creative vision? Or was this disaster inevitable from the moment they greenlit the project? Fans are divided, but one thing is certain. When you're remaking a classic, you can't afford to lose sight of what made it special in the first place. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into Hollywood chaos. Whether it's fairy tale fails, studio scandals, or blockbuster blunders, we've got plenty more where that came from. Until next time, remember, if you're going to remake a classic, make sure the magic shows up with the budget. Otherwise, you're just setting yourself up for a fall, and trust me, audiences won't hesitate to pile on the criticism. catch you in the next one.